cold winter months approaching, the U.S. government's strategic inventory of diesel fuel is at its lowest seasonal level ever, with some reports indicating the U.S. has fewer than 25 days of supply left. How will this affect American working families? How did we get here? Joining me now to discuss it all is Dave Walsh. He's a former CEO of Mitsubishi Hitachi Power Systems. Dave, welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you? Good to have you. Appreciate having me, Joe.
We're glad to have you. We need your insight. This headline we see, 25 days of diesel fuel left. Most of us do not make a habit of tracking how much diesel fuel there is in the country. Put this in context for us. How big of an emergency is this?
Well, diesel fuel is essential to our life as we know it, industrially, on a personal level. All durable goods are shipped in vehicles using diesel fuel. All foods are shipped. The entire intermodal rail system between states is diesel powered, diesel locomotives, black start engines that drive the power generation system in the background to keep the grid stable are diesel fired black start backups. Diesel's at the core of everything, industrially and farming, of course. Farm machinery is entirely run by diesel. Bus systems in cities are run by diesel. So we're at globally the lowest level of global inventory since 1982, despite having 3.4 billion more people on Earth since 1982. Nationally, we are at the lowest supply ever. There's 25.4 day supply. There are some not entirely negative reasons for that. We're coming out of a fall outage season. Typically in refineries, the turnaround season is in September, October. Refineries tend to be down for maintenance. We're coming out of that. So there's some good news there. But despite that, we're at the lowest level per day of capacity that we've been ever. And we're heading into late fall, winter heating season. We're in the Northeast and upper Midwest. Diesel fuel is used a lot for winter heating. So, some concern we may have some shortages.
Now, in normal times, when things are going well, what kind of reserve of diesel fuel supply would we expect to have?
Well, what this number is the inventory across the industry of manufacturers or refiners. Typically, we'd have on the East Coast, we'd have about 44 million barrels on hand. Right now, we have about 24.4 million barrels. So we're low by about half of what a typical supply would be at this time of the year. Despite coming out of an outage season, right now we typically have 44 million barrels. We have about a little less than 24 million right now. So it is a bit of a problem.
Is there a reason to think that we're going to catch up? Do our refinery capacity, is it there? So we're going to get that cushion back, or do you expect to see it shrink? Is there a real risk that we're going to run out?
Well, we were about this low back in early May. So this cyclically did happen about 6 months ago. The winter season is a little bit worrisome, again, because we're heading into, what appears to be, it's been a fairly cool early fall. And if we have a cold winter in the Northeast and upper Midwest, we could run into some supply issues. Pricing is high. We've had 6 major refineries shutter in the 2020, 2021 period. We had very low demand in that recession we had in March through August of 20, coming when COVID hit really hard, things were shut down. A lot of refineries were closed. 6 of them were closed permanently coming out of that. One in New Mexico, California, one in North Dakota, one in Wyoming, Shell in Louisiana, and then the Philadelphia Energy Solutions refinery was closed. All these do diesel fuel and collectively produce about 750,000 barrels per day of diesel fuel. So we're short on national capacity significantly because of that in refining space. We had been also a pretty big importer from Russia as late as February this year. We had 1.6 million barrels come from there. That's stopped. So places like the UAE have stepped up. We're also an exporter. We're in a complicated energy business. We do remain a dominant energy player, despite the actions of the administration to, in the long run, curtail that. We remain a big player. We export 11.4 million barrels a day of product, including diesel product, to Central and South America to this day. So we are also a net exporter of oil in a very large way. There's been some discussions folks have had about curtailing that, but problems with that are if you want to be a major player and you want to be energy dominant, you can't just withdraw from the table with your customers who are foreign in Mexico and Central America, South America, and expect that they'll be there for you if you abandon them. So we have to think very carefully about restricting exports. There's been some discussion of that. Hopefully we don't need to look at that.
So you can't just say, we don't have any more to sell. We're going to keep it for ourselves because that creates other problems. We're talking to Dave Walsh. Yep, the former CEO of Mitsubishi Hitachi Power Systems. And Dave, you've mentioned some of the impacts potentially on heating supply in the Northeast and the upper Midwest that depend on diesel fuel. What other impacts could the average American family experience if this shortage were to get worse?
Well, again, farm machinery is run by diesel power, 99% of it. The rail system interstate is run based on diesel locomotives. The 18-wheeler deliveries the grocery stores receive are diesel almost entirely. That's a bit of a worry. I mean, if we actually would go short of this critical commodity, we'd have food supply issues on deliveries, and that would be a big problem in addition to the heating problem. So it's important that this doesn't turn into a crisis. At the end of the day, throttling exports would then probably, unfortunately, have to be looked at. Right now. We've still got some cushion with the inventory that's there nationally, but and again, that's not a government controlled inventory. That's the inventory that the primary refiners of diesel product have. It's not really controlled by the government, so to speak. Oil reserve is unrefined petroleum. Refined and unrefined can be used to make diesel, but it's generally crude oil. The diesel issue, to the secretary's point, it's essential for military purposes. It's essential for national defense. Our entire ground-based fleet of tanks, jeeps, trucks, military vehicles are driven on diesel fuel. So, for our administration to be, every department in the administration has been all over a strategy all about eliminating fossil fuel dependence as rapidly as possible, from Jen Granholm, who runs energy, to the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, proclaiming that we need to abandon fossil fuels as soon as possible. It is a completely unrealistic posture when you look at the fundamental nature of the importance of diesel fuel just for one fossil fuel and how dependent we are on it, and how there is no replacement for that on the near-term horizon. There's no solar power or wind power that's going to replace our dependence on diesel fuel for military purposes and transportation intermodally in country of critical goods. So the restrictions the administration places on fossil fuel production are extremely unrealistic, given that 95% of all energy consumed in the country does not emanate from solar and wind. It's nuclear, it's oil and gas dominantly, it's natural gas, it's coal, it's hydroelectric to some degree, but 95% of our energy in the country is not wind and solar. By the way, China is the same. They're identical in that respect. So the world is very, very, very much based on the use of fossil fuels and for the development of society and the goodness of mankind and for foodstuffs being delivered and made.
Dave, we're talking a bit about the impact on the military, and Defense Secretary John Kirby, he was asked about the diesel shortage, and here's what he had to say. Let's play clip 7.
What are we doing to prepare for the winter and to ramp up supply of diesel?
I'll take the question on the diesel because I just don't have the data on that in front of me. So let me take that and we'll get back to you on that.
Dave, what's your reaction to that?
I think he certainly knows the criticality of it. He's a military guy. He understands the criticality of it. I think it's a way, what he's doing is distancing himself from having to compare and contrast the comments of Secretary Granholm, Janet Yellen, the Secretary of the Interior, all about ending our dependence on fossil fuels as soon as possible. That when you get down to where, if you will, the rubber meets the road, the pun that makes sense here, in military hardware, you've got to have this. And there is no near-term replacement for it, such as there isn't for transportation of foodstuffs. So I think he wanted to separate himself from having to contradict most of the strategy. There is no energy strategy in the country. That's one of the problems. Commentary of all the department heads under the administration who are clamoring for a cessation of fossil fuel use nationally. It's irrational. It's not a rational policy.
Dave, we've gotten the political perspective on this shortage from the Hill. You're an industry guy, though. To you, in your opinion, what degree to what degree was this avoidable or not? Is this a self-inflicted wound, or is this just the market doing what it does?
The market forces are at play here somewhat. We have emerged pretty well from the COVID downturn of 2020, and demand is up. But the fact of no incentives in place for refiners to invest in increasing refining capacity. Oh, the fact of not going ahead with the Keystone XL pipeline, the material coming off that 880,000 barrels a day of material was bitumen, which is the kind of oil that comes from the tar sands. It's ideal for manufacturing diesel as a downstream product. That was a large portion of that fuel supply coming from Alberta via the Keystone XL pipeline was going to be to make diesel fuel. Well, we've stopped that. So that's a self-inflicted wound. The refiners not getting any incentives and, upside such as wind and solar have monstrous economic incentives from the government. It really isn't a fair playing field. Yeah. Fossil fuels of this type have none. In fact, have severe restrictions. The EPA is going after now PEC. That's a chloriding agent used in making diesel. That they're attacking that, all in favor of trying to convert the industry to biofuels, which are far less efficient and take a lot more energy to make. And the energy value of biofuels, biodiesel, is about 1/9 of the typical diesel fuel. So there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds by government policy that have, driven negativity into this industry.
Now, Dave, final question for you. We also know that OPEC has cut production. President Biden asked them not to do so. Is their decision to cut production while we are also cutting our own production? Are we creating a noose that we can allow OPEC to hang us with in about 30 seconds?
Yes, we are. We are acting by cutting our own production for other reasons, for the environmental reason. We are acting just like OPEC. We are acting like we're a member because we also began withdrawing production consciously, intentionally with the inauguration of this administration in January of 21. So we've been taking the same actions as we're complaining about OPEC taking. But we have a different reason or different rationale, but we're doing the same thing. So it's very frustrating.
That's an incredible analysis to realize that we're just OPEC for environmental purposes. Dave Walsh, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, sir.